I'm Linda Whalen.
And I'm Brian Mulligan.
Welcome again to The Road to Reading. Today we revisit the topic of spelling instruction.
Now, when we first looked at spelling, we talked about why it was important to be a good speller. We covered the stages of spelling development and defined a lot of terms.
That's right, and then we went into the classroom and showed you some actual spelling instruction and talked about many different word sort activities that a teacher can use to teach spelling effectively. Research has shown that good spellers move beyond basic phonetic spelling and begin to use a repertoire of strategies.
You know, Linda, good spellers also spell words with automaticity, unless, of course, the students like me.
In our previous discussion, we gave you some parameters for what spelling instruction should include.
Essentially, spelling instruction should use the student's vocabulary to build an understanding of redundant language patterns, provide realistic goals for accuracy, and help students recognize their need to check their spelling so that the chances to communicate clearly improve.
That's right, Brian. Now, having already looked at the mechanics, we turn our attention to resources and ideas which are available to help you as a teacher. There are many commercial programs available and lots of ideas, but it all starts at the assessment stage. To have an effective spelling program, you must first assess each student's spelling level.
One of the best tools is the Qualitative Spelling Inventory. It is particularly useful for demonstrating the broad range of spelling skills within a single classroom. The inventory consists of 6 word lists that are drawn from a larger pool of words that construct basal spelling books for each grade level. The lists don't take long to give, and they can even be given in a group.
The word lists represent both the underlying structural order in the orthography and the developmental progression of children's concepts about print. They also include high-frequency Anglo-Saxon words at the beginning levels and lower-frequency words of Latin and Greek origin, which embody complex relationships between sound, meaning, and spelling patterns at the higher levels.
The teacher starts by letting students know that they are going to be given an inventory of words to learn about how they spell. It's important to stress that this is not a test. They are to do their best, and this will be the most helpful thing that they can do. The teacher should also explain that some words will be easy to spell and some will be more difficult. If they don't know a word, they should just do the best they can. Now, after having the students write their name and date on the paper, the teacher begins by saying the word once, then using the word in a sentence, and then saying the word a second time. Linda?
Thanks, Brian. Here's an example of 8 words from the upper level assessment list. After you give the first 8 words, stop and have them check their work before continuing. If a student misspells 5 out of the first 8 words, go to one of the elementary qualitative inventories. If they did not misspell 5 out of the first 8 words, continue with the list until the student does miss 5 out of 8 words.
When you have concluded the inventories, it is time to assess for your students' instructional levels. Remember, as you assess, that it is important for you as the teacher to analyze the types of errors your students are making, not just identify their levels. This will help you match instruction to each student's identified needs. After you assess what levels your students are at, it is time to decide what program works best for your classroom. Now, I think at this point it might be a good idea to reiterate some suggestions for spelling instruction. Don't you, Linda?
Yes, I do. Whatever program you use, it should include these components. The students should be involved in active exploration of words, not just rote memorization. In the pretest phase, the tests should be self-corrected. This helps the student with visualization and recall. There must be daily practice, but it doesn't have to be long. 10 to 15 minutes will be more than adequate. The students should be taught to sort words by sound and then by sight. Activities should lead the student toward discovery of patterns and generalizations. And finally, dictate sentences daily.
We all know how frustrating it can be to teach spelling. As a matter of fact, the most common frustration among teachers is that the students ace the tests on Friday and then they cannot spell the word the next Tuesday. That's why it's so important to combine listening, speaking, reading, and writing in word study. The more the students actually work with the words, the better they will remember them. So then, what methods are available to teach spelling? Well, that is the $64,000 question, so let's take a look at several methods.
Let's do that. Each method will be more or less successful depending upon how each child actually learns. First, is the Fernald Method, which works really well if you have students who are more kinesthetic in their learning style. Using the Fernald Method, the teacher has the students actually work with the words in a more tactile manner.
This is accomplished by having the student trace the word with a finger while saying the word slowly by syllables. Words can be written on rough surfaces, such as a tray filled with salt or sand. Another idea is to take a picture from a magazine and have the students erase the word out of the picture. This makes a sort of a modern art project, too.
I like that idea.
Do you?
After tracing the word, the student simultaneously writes the word on a piece of scrap paper and says the syllables aloud. At this point, attention is drawn to correct form.
If an error is made at any point, the tracing process is repeated.
The word is then entered into a spelling dictionary or used in a meaningful context, such as a writing project.
If you have a student who is perhaps more of a visual learner, another technique focusing on meaning and pronunciation can be a great help. The Fitzgerald Method requires students to look at the word, pronounce it correctly, and then use it in a sentence. An important foundation for this method is imagery. Students are asked to see the word and then say the word. After imagery comes recall. Recall asks students to look at the word and then close their eyes to see the word. Then the students spell the word orally, open their eyes to see if it is correct, and repeat the process if an error is made. Finally, students write the word correctly from memory, check the spelling against the original, and check that the writing is clear and legible.
In the final step, which is called mastery, students cover the word and write it. If correct, the word is covered and written 2 more times.
For those students who are auditory learners, the Gillingham Sos Method can be a great tool. The teacher starts out by pronouncing the word. Students hear the word and repeat the word. With this method, students are hearing their own voices and feeling the correct form of articulation.
The next step is to have the students say the word sound by sound. After identifying each sound or phoneme, the name of the letter that represents that sound is said and written as it is being named. As a final step, the word that was written is read aloud.
Whatever method you use, Linda, you then need to let students practice with the words. Activities that focus on working with those words should now take up the bulk of students' time with the words. Well, some of the best ways to help students learn their spelling words are to play games.
That's right, and you know, these games can be team competitions or individual games. Scores can be kept and prizes given at the end of the quarter. We saw in our previous program how one teacher used a weekly Scrabble game to help students with spelling and vocabulary words. These students earn the right to play when they have completed their contract of work. As the teacher circulates the classroom, she uses the individual situations as teaching tools.
What is this? Tear. Is there another way to say that word?
Tear.
Tear, yeah. It's 2 words, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You could use it either way. As tear, it would be
Tearing.
And as tear, it would be. Now, why do you have now? I probably would have gone with the EA when 2 vowels go walking. The first does the talking, right? So I would have probably gone with tear first. But
You know, Brian, there are other games too on the market that can be kept in the classroom and used to help teach spelling.
I do know. Like Rummy Roots, that's a great game. It teaches 42 Greek and Latin roots through 4 different game formats as a vocabulary enhancement and spelling aid.
Yeah, and you know, you can also add to it by getting more roots, which has been designed to emphasize prefixed Latin roots and commonly used English words such as concur, infect, and protract.
Some of my favorites. How about the old standby hangman? It can be done on the board, or you can actually buy a game that has a little machine that draws the various stages of hanging. That sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, it would. You know, Brian, I think you're reverting to a second childhood.
We didn't have cool stuff like this when I was in school.
Well, there's more cool stuff. How about Boggle or Per Quacky or Spill and Spell?
What are those?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I just happen to have 2 of those games right here.
Well, okay.
Per Quacky and Boggle.
Excellent. Let's play.
Well, I don't think we have time to play.
Oh.
But the 2 games that I have here are very similar. Essentially, most of these games are letter dice games. What happens is the players attempt to make the longest words or the most words from the assortment of the letters which show up on the dice after they've been mixed up in the shaker.
So, I see. They all operate on a word-building premise? Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And usually they're timed, so there's a limit to each player's efforts. And these can be played with any number of players or teams. Even individuals can do this and try to beat the clock. And it can be really exciting.
I guess so. Do they all come with this egg timer, Linda?
Yeah. And you know, some students could even prefer to have a little more time. You know, teachers should feel free to modify the rules anytime it increases student success. It can be especially worthwhile to modify the rules to fit a particular spelling objective.
This is a great idea. Of course, you don't have to purchase games in order to have fun with words. Teachers are great at making up games of their own all the time, and many books are available filled with wonderful ideas.
The first thing we're going to do today is do our bingo spelling game. I'm going to read the words, and you can write them in any box that you want. Try to spell them correctly. The first word is 5. There are 5 of you in our group.
Resource teacher Joanne Jorgensen wraps her students' spelling test inside the game of Spelling Bingo.
C-A-M-E.
Excellent. C-A-M-E. If you have it spelled correctly, you may put an X in the box.
Another game students enjoy involves word blocks. These manipulatives are sold for use in mathematics, but this teacher has glued letters on the sides of the blocks, allowing her to design activities with words at her students' instructional level.
In this spelling relay game, one student from each team writes a single letter of the spelling word. If they think a letter is incorrect, they can erase it, but they can only do one or the other in each turn, write or erase. The first team to spell the word correctly wins. Students on either team or watching in the classroom can challenge the spelling.
Station, like a train station. Ready? Go. Oh, they're fast. Ooh, this is a close one. Wow. Oh, okay. I have to ask Sammy one question because he did it so fast. What letter is that?
T.
Oh, okay, T. Whew, you guys are good. Okay, table 4 has S-T-A-T-I-O-N. What do you think out there?
Yeah.
Yeah? Give them a round of applause. They get 2 points.
Oh, that looked like fun. In addition to games, there are many other great ideas, more than we can really mention. Let's take a look at a few of the best and most usable. First of all, students can create spelling posters and picture cards. Picture cards can have a specific spelling word which a student can decorate, or the spelling poster can include all the spelling words for the year with whatever decoration the student wants to add. Students will have fun learning while using some creative artistic talents. Encouraging students to use personal dictionaries or word study notebooks can be a great way to cement those words. Students can create word games, poetry, and experiment with language. The notebooks can chronicle their ideas as well as their progress. A real way of creating ownership is to allow students to self-select problem words or interest words to add to their word study. There should not be more than 5 per week, but it is a great way for students to become more personally involved with their word lists. We all agree that one of the best ways to learn is to do. When students are given proofreading instruction and allowed to edit each other's work, they can put into practice what they've learned.
And of course, we can add to that, Brian, the many word sort activities that were discussed on our previous episode on spelling. The possibilities and combinations are almost limitless. And now, it's time for our tip of the day, a fun and exciting activity that you can use in your classroom immediately. Today we feature an activity called Circle Story that is fun and instructional. In this activity, the entire class is going to write a story together. In fact, they're going to write as many stories as there are students in the class. First, if you can, arrange the desks in a circle. This will greatly facilitate the process and enhance the feeling of community. Next, give each of the students a piece of paper and a pen. And now the fun begins. Write the beginning sentence of an original story. Pick a theme, or let their imaginations run wild. Each story will be different, and that's the point. Then everyone passes his or her paper to one person over to the right. Beneath the last student's opening line, the next student will write a single sentence continuing that story. They can only write one sentence. Then the papers are passed on yet again, and each pupil will write a new line that continues the story. This process of writing a sentence and passing the papers continues until the papers have returned full circle to their originators. So if you have a class of 30, you now have 30 different stories, with one line written by each student. Reading the stories aloud in class is always exciting, often funny, and occasionally poignant. As the papers are being written, be sure to remind the students to note where their next line is going in the story. If it's toward the top third, they need to open and build the story. If in the middle, they need to develop the emerging theme or characters. And if in the bottom third, they should be looking for ways to bring things to a satisfying close. The circle story is an excellent tool to build writing and vocabulary skills, as well as story structure and word use. And now, Brian has a wonderful new reading resource to tell us about. Brian?
I certainly do. For the working teacher, finding scholarly and accurate reading research without a major investment of time and energy can seem like an impossible dream, just like the song. Today's reading resource, however, could make that dream come true. The Reading Research Quarterly delivers cutting-edge articles, essays, and papers written by top professors and practitioners in the field, 4 times a year. The information in each issue, which represents the latest findings and research results, is presented in a detailed and scholarly manner, with numerous tables, statistics, charts, and graphs to guide you through the material. In addition to being current and comprehensive, the Reading Research Quarterly is also quick and easy to use, allowing you to find information in your area of interest or need. This resource can provide a sure foundation to classroom activities and will ensure that you are at the forefront of reading research. The Reading Research Quarterly is published by the International Reading Association and can be found in many libraries or is available by subscription. And now, Linda, I see you have another invaluable resource for today's viewers. Today's studio guest.
Oh, very resourceful of you, Brian. With me today is Sharon Wada from Jefferson One School in Anaheim, and I'm sure that you will recognize her from our tape segments today. Welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you, Linda.
Sharon, how do you fit spelling instruction into your daily lesson plan?
Well, basically, I try to incorporate it into everything that we do. I try to tie it into math. I try to make it fun for them. I have them create their own word searches and word scrambles, and they trade them with each other. I'll do things like, while we're teaching fractions right now, we're doing things like I'll take a word and then they'll count the number of vowels, and then they'll place that as the numerator, and the denominator will be the total number of letters. Then I'll teach them how to add the fractions by taking the consonants over the total number of letters, and then we talk about adding those up to equal the whole word.
Oh my gosh.
So we try to just tie it in and make it meaningful for them.
And is that something that you came up with on your own, or did you get that as from a resource somewhere?
I've kind of picked up bits and pieces from here and there and just kind of put it together, and it's worked.
Well, it seems like your kids just are having such a great time with the things that you're doing in class. Do you use games as rewards?
I use games a lot, and I actually try to incorporate it as part of my curriculum, and it really makes the kids motivated to spell correctly. It's not such a chore, and they don't rely on me to spell things for them. They want to try to spell it correctly. But I do have games as rewards. If they finish things early, I have games like Scrabble and these chalkboards where they can play hangman and do that themselves, and they really enjoy that.
And how else do you use a chalkboard?
I'll do individual type of assessments where I'll give a word and then I'll have them write it at their desk, and then they hide it and then they show it in the air, and that way I can just take a quick assessment as to who's getting it right away. And then I can pull from there into smaller groups and work on different patterns and things that I think they need to work on. Another thing I do, it's kind of a game where I'll take a word and I'll ask them to identify them as consonants or vowels. So for example, stop would be consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. And then I'll ask them to try to think of another word that fits that same pattern. For example, clap. So I would write on the board consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, and then they try to come up with words that fit that. And then for my higher level students, I'll try to think of more difficult words And then the patterns obviously get a little more complicated.
Yes.
And they really enjoy that.
Yes. What other games have you found to be really effective?
Well, the old traditional, as I mentioned, Scrabble and Hangman are still
Yes.
favorites, and the kids love to come up and actually run the games themselves, the Hangman themselves, and that kind of thing. I play another game called Eggplant, and it's kind of a silly game, but they just love it. And I can do it with the whole class, or I can do it in a small group. For example, I'll give a word, and then each person gives a letter, and we go around the circle, and then every time you come to the letter E, you have to say eggplant instead of E. So they get a kick. So, for example, if I said N, you'd say, or for never, I'd say N, and you'd say eggplant, and I'd say V, and you'd say eggplant, and I'd say R, and if you said E, it's the ooh and the ah. So it's fun. They love it.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
How do you assess your students, and when do you do it?
I constantly assess them. I assess them formally, informally, orally. I have them do things where they'll orally spell a word to each other in partners and then record what they misspelled and what they had correct, and that way we can work on their individual needs. But I'm constantly assessing them in all different ways, not just their writing, obviously in their writing, but I try to look for, what they're doing, what their mistakes are, and try to focus on ways we can help them.
Now, you teach 3rd and 4th grade together.
Right.
How do you handle working with children at different levels?
That's a challenge, and I enjoy the challenge. And one of the activities that I've really found to be effective is the making words, Pat Cunningham's making words.
Yes.
And that just really allows me to focus on patterns and blends and rules and just irregular words, and it challenges my more gifted students also. So it's really a valuable resource. But that's one of the things that I use.
Sharon, what method or what combination of methods do you think is most effective in teaching spelling?
I believe a combination. I try to keep a balance of formal lessons for the making big words, that kind of thing, poetic experiences, and I mix them in with things like rhythmic chants, and we play with names, and they seem silly to the kids, but they all have.
What do you mean play with names? What's an example
for
of that?
example, your name Linda, I will have them take away the L and put BR. So now you're Brenda, and then we all say that together, and we do different funny little things, and then I'll take the middle chunk of someone's name and then exchange another chunk of letters, and they get a kick out of it, they love it, but they're really practicing phonemic awareness and chunking words and letters.
How can parents help out at home?
Definitely just reading with them all the time, and when they get their spelling lists, of course, they can orally practice with them. They can do written practice, but even just driving down the street, just asking them, how do you spell, and ask them to think of those things as they're just on a daily basis. Yeah.
Where do you get your word lists from?
I do a variety of different types of reading activities. So I combine some basal work with some whole language. So what I usually try to do is take words that they're using in context, and I also take the other half of the list from pattern types of words. So I'll for example, short O words, and then I'll have maybe half of the list with that pattern. So a lot of times I compile my own lists. Yeah.
We talked about making words, making big words. Are there any other resources that you'd like to share that you get good ideas from?
I've actually had a lot of success with phonics. We use another book by Pat Cunningham, and there's a lot of really good ideas in there. And like I said before, just a lot of games.
Yes.
To me, games are a great resource.
Talk to me a little about a success with a student that you might have had.
I like to teach my kids tricks, spelling tricks. And one of my students always mixed up the E and the I in the word piece as in a piece of cake. So I said to him, well, let's take a look at this word. And I wrote it correctly, and he saw that it said P-I-E-C-E. And I said, well, let's take a look at the I and the E. Let's think to yourself, this is a piece of cake, like you're going to eat the cake. And so think to yourself, the I eat. So I before E.
Ah.
So I eat. So then it kind of works on the fact that there's two different kinds of peace, the homonyms. And so he always remembered that ever since then. He just never forgot it. So.
That's a great idea. Do you use food as a reward? We were talking about that in an earlier show.
My students will tell you I am a big food fanatic. That's all I talk about, pizza, and I use food and everything. But yeah, I do have my little rewards, my candy rewards and everything. But they're at a point now where they realize that that's not what they're doing it for. And that's what I strive for. I just want them to have fun. And the candy's there and it's fun, but it's not everything, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Sharon, thank you so much for joining us
thank
today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but the key to teaching spelling effectively is to remember a few steps. First, there is assessment, and then select the appropriate materials and lists for the students to study. After that, develop activities for word study. Now that is the fun part. Be consistent and provide daily practice and opportunities for students to use their words. Finally, it's important to encourage students to continue building their word study knowledge base. For Brian Mulligan, and for all of us here at The Road to Reading, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I'm Linda Whalen. We'll see you on the road.